The morning my contract as an NBC News anchor went public, my mother uploaded a 6-minute tearful rant calling me the family's greatest disgrace. Her video went viral, viewed 2 million times by noon. And that same night, entirely because of her public humiliation, my debut broadcast audience was double what the network had projected. This is how a mother's attempt to destroy her daughter's reputation accidentally built her a national platform. I am that daughter. For years, my mother curated a perfect family image online, while privately I was her greatest disappointment. But when her private scorn became a public spectacle, it forced a single, brutal question into the open. What does a daughter do when her mother tries to bury her, only to accidentally give her the biggest platform of her life? To understand that collision, you need to understand the silence that came before the scream. Our story doesn't start with a viral video. It starts in a perfectly staged living room in Scottsdale, Arizona, where my mother, Linda, built her brand on a fiction, The Flawless Family. She was a local lifestyle influencer with 40,000 followers. Her content was beige couches, organized pantries, and a narrative of domestic bliss. My father, Robert, was the silent supporting character in this show. And then there were 2 daughters. My older sister, Chloe, was the star. The homecoming queen, the varsity cheer captain, the one whose smile matched the aesthetic. I was 3 years younger, the production assistant, the one holding the ring light, editing the clips, and most importantly, staying out of frame. My crime wasn't rebellion. It was a different kind of ambition, one her camera couldn't capture. While Chloe practiced her pageant walk, I was in my room devouring books by Christiane Amanpour and Walter Cronkite. I didn't want a spotlight, I wanted to hold one up on the world. In high school, I started writing for the underground paper, covering the school board meetings Chloe would never attend. When a piece I wrote about cafeteria funding got picked up by the local newspaper, my mother's reaction wasn't pride. It was a quiet, cold correction. Don't air our dirty laundry, Alina. It's embarrassing. Here's a small, telling example. Senior year, I won a national essay contest sponsored by the Washington Press Club. First prize was a summer internship at our local NBC affiliate. The letter came on a Tuesday. That same afternoon, Chloe got a callback for a minor reality TV show. One guess which event made it into that week's vlog. The caption read, "So proud of my girl chasing her dreams," over a clip of Chloe practicing her audition lines. My internship letter sat on the counter, untouched, until I filed it away myself. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself their approval was a currency I didn't need. I poured everything into my applications, my grades, my clips. I figured if I couldn't be the daughter they celebrated, I'd become someone they couldn't explain away. And for one brief, shimmering moment, I was. The day I got my acceptance to the Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism, something in the house shifted. It was the first accomplishment of mine that had a name big enough to impress even my mother's most judgmental follower. She read the email over my shoulder, her perfume a cloud around us. Columbia, she said, the word foreign on her tongue. That's a real school. It wasn't warmth, it was an appraisal. For the first time, I was an asset, not a liability. That night, she mentioned it passively in her Instagram stories. Big news in our household, so much drive. No name, no context, but it was a mention. I felt a pathetic, desperate flicker of hope. Maybe this was the bridge. I should have known better. Chloe was 22 by then, working at a high-end boutique, her reality TV dream having fizzled. The spotlight, which had never left her, was now subtly tilting. And I watched her eyes during that dinner, smiling as she asked about my program, my housing, my plans. It was the same smile from our childhood, the one that never reached her eyes. I thought she was being a sister. I was handing her a blueprint. The first year at Columbia was a revelation. I was surrounded by people who spoke my language. I worked overnight shifts at the campus news service, broke a small story about library funding cuts that got picked up regionally. I called home, bursting to tell someone. My dad said, "That's nice, kiddo." My mother said, "Don't let it go to your head. Stay humble." Chloe, when I told her, was silent for a beat too long. "Wow," she finally said. "You're really going for it." The crack came in my second year. My mentor, a legendary producer named Martin Finch, took me under his wing. He was old school, tough, and saw something in my relentless digging. He secured me a coveted internship at the NBC News headquarters in New York for the summer. It was the foot in the door every journalism student kills for. It was also, crucially, unpaid. I called home, my voice shaking with excitement. I laid out the plan. I'd take out a small extra loan, pick up a weekend bartending gig, crash on a friend's couch. The silence on the other end was a physical thing, then my mother's voice, sharp as glass. An unpaid internship. After all we've spent on Colombia, Alina, that's not a job, that's you being taken advantage of. You'll come home, work something sensible, and finish your degree online. I argued, I pleaded. I explained that this was the pipeline, this was how it worked. Martin Finch's name meant nothing to her. The prestige of NBC meant less than the missing paycheck. The call ended with her final decree. We will not fund your summer of playing reporter. End of discussion. I was 24, terrified and faced with a choice: obey and lose the opportunity, or defy and lose my safety net. I chose defiance. I took the max in loans. I worked 2 brutal jobs. I lived on instant coffee and the sheer terror of failing. I didn't call home for a month. When I finally did, Chloe answered. Her voice was syrup. Mom's really hurt, Alina. She says you've chosen strangers over your family. I was too exhausted to fight it. The internship was a baptism by fire. I was the first one in, the last one out, chasing facts like my life depended on it. On the final day, Martin called me into his office. He didn't smile. He said, "You're stubborn, you listen, you don't quit. There's an associate producer slot opening on the weekend desk in 6 months. If you graduate top of your class, it's yours." It was the closest thing to praise I'd ever received. I graduated with honors. No one from Scottsdale came. Martin was there, a gruff nod from the back of the hall. I started at NBC as an associate producer, a tiny cog in a massive machine. For 3 years, I disappeared into the work. I became the person you called at 3 a.m. when a story broke. I learned to craft a narrative, to find the human heart in a data set, to hold my ground in editorial meetings. I built a reputation. Relentless, meticulous, invisible on camera, but essential behind it. My family life was a quiet, cold war, occasional text strings, birthday cards with generic well wishes. Chloe would send me links to my mother's posts, the curated perfection continuing without me. I was the unmentionable, the daughter who chose the fast life in New York. The narrative was set. I was ungrateful, led astray, too big for my britches. Then 8 months ago, everything changed again. The anchor of our flagship morning news segment suddenly departed. The network needed a fresh face, someone with digital savvy, a younger demographic appeal, but with serious journalistic chops. Martin, now a senior executive, threw my name into the ring. I thought it was a courtesy. Then I made the shortlist. Then I won it. The contract was for a 1-year trial as a national anchor. My debut would be a prime Sunday evening spot. The press release was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. My entire life had narrowed to this single, terrifying, exhilarating point. I called my father, my voice trembling. "Dad, I got it. I'm going to be on NBC, nationally." He was quiet. Then, "Your mother won't like this." He was right, she didn't. The night before the announcement, she called. It wasn't a congratulations, it was an ultimatum. "Alina, think about what this will do to the family. People will talk, they'll dig, they'll see us. Is this really what you want, to embarrass us on a national scale?" I told her it was my dream. Her final words were, "You're making your choice." The press release went live at 8 a.m. Eastern. By 8:05, my professional email was flooded. By 8:15, my phone started buzzing with texts from old colleagues. And at 8:22, as I was sitting in hair and makeup for my first promotional shoot, my best friend from college sent me a link with a single message. "Alina, what is this?" I clicked it, and there was my mother in her perfectly lit living room without her usual filter, her face raw with tears she hadn't bothered to blot. The video was titled, "A Mother's Heartbreak." And for 6 minutes, she spoke directly to her 40,000 followers about her greatest disgrace. A daughter who valued fame over family, who traded loyalty for a logo, who had broken her heart beyond repair. She never said NBC, she never said my name, but she didn't have to. The internet is a detective, and it was about to connect the dots for her. The video didn't just connect dots. It created a wildfire. Within an hour, A Mother's Heartbreak had 50,000 views. Within 2, someone in the comments had posted a link to the NBC press release about their newest anchor talent. The algorithm did the rest. By noon, the video had 200,000 views and was trending on Twitter with the hashtag NBC Family Drama. My professional announcement was now buried under my mother's personal grenade. My phone started ringing, not friends, network executives. The first call was from Martin. His voice was a low, controlled storm. "Alina, my office now." I was still in the makeup chair, my face half done. I wiped it off, my hands shaking. The walk from the studio to the executive floor felt like a mile. Every assistant, every intern seemed to be looking at their phone, then at me. Martin's office was all cold glass and city views. He didn't sit. Talk to me, what is this? I explained, my voice thin. My mother, the influencer, the ultimatum. I showed him the video on my phone. He watched 30 seconds, his expression unreadable. He put the phone down. This is a PR nightmare. It's also, perversely, a spotlight. The board is in a meeting right now. They're discussing whether to pull your debut. The air left my lungs. Pull it. Or lean into it, he said, turning to the window. There are two schools of thought. One says this is messy family drama that tarnishes the brand. The other says this is a human interest story that just handed us $1 million worth of free publicity. The question is, which narrative wins, the disgraced daughter or the resilient journalist? I was a story. My life, my pain, was being assessed for its marketability. What do I do? I asked, the child in my voice horrifying me. You get in front of it. You go on air tonight. Not your big debut. The local 6 p.m. news update. 90 seconds. You read the teleprompter about the day's market close. You show them you're unshaken. You prove the professional can exist separately from the personal circus. If you crack, you're done. I had 6 hours. 6 hours while the video hit 1 million views. 6 hours while internet sleuths found my childhood photos, my high school paper, posts from my mother's account where I was conspicuously absent. The narrative was crystallizing, the ambitious ice queen who left her weeping mother behind. My father called once. I let it go to voicemail. He sounded old, defeated. Elena, your mother, she didn't mean for it to go this far, she's just upset. That was the apology. She didn't mean for it to go this far, not that she shouldn't have done it, just that she misjudged the scale. Chloe texted, a single line, you've really done it now. I didn't respond. I was too busy memorizing every fluctuation of the S&P 500. At 5:45 p.m., I sat in the news chair for the first time. The studio lights were blindingly hot. The producer's voice in my earpiece was all business. 90 seconds, Elena, clean and cool, we're counting on you. The teleprompter scrolled. The floor manager counted down. 5, 4, 3. The red light on the camera glowed. I took a breath that felt like my first in hours. And I read. My voice didn't shake. My smile was calm, professional. I delivered the financial news as if my world wasn't burning down outside the studio walls. For 90 seconds, I was just a journalist. When the light went off, my shoulders slumped. The producer's voice came back. Good job, stand by. Martin was waiting off set. He gave a curt nod. You held the line. The board is watching the metrics. Your debut is still on for Sunday, but it's conditional. The audience for this 6 p.m. clip is already triple its usual. People are tuning in for the train wreck. We need them to stay for the journalist. I went home to my empty apartment, the silence a roar. I made the mistake of looking online. The comments on my mother's video were a tidal wave of vitriol, most of it directed at me. How could you do this to your mom? Fame-hungry witch. NBC should fire her. Mixed in were a handful of voices asking different questions. Why is a mother airing this publicly? This feels manipulative. But they were drowned out. Then, at 9 p.m., the first major pivot. A journalist from a digital media outlet, someone I'd never met, published an article. The headline, The Mother Behind the Meltdown, Inside Linda's Curated World. It was a deep dive into my mother's influencer account. It contrasted her tearful video with years of posts praising Chloe's every achievement and my utter absence. It highlighted the financial disclosures she'd made in fine print about brand deals. It framed her not as a heartbroken mother, but as a content creator whose primary product was a perfect family myth. And I was the flaw in the narrative she couldn't airbrush out. The article went viral in its own right. The conversation began to split. Now there were two camps, Team Mother and Team Daughter. The stakes were no longer just my job. They were about public opinion, about winning the story. The next morning, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. It was a producer from a major daytime talk show. We want you and your mother, she said, her voice chirpy. A live reconciliation. It would be huge ratings. I was stunned. You want to turn this into a spectacle. Elena, it already is one. We're just offering a stage. Think about it. I hung up disgusted, but an hour later Martin called. The talk show reached out to us too. The network's official position is no comment, but privately, some higher-ups think it could be good. It would control the narrative. By feeding the beast, I asked. By steering it, he replied, his tone leaving no room for debate. The decision is yours, but your debut audience projection just increased by 40%. They're expecting a show. You need to decide what kind you're going to give them. The pressure was a vice. From one side, my family's very public destruction. From the other, my career's cynical opportunity. And in the middle, me, trying to remember why I wanted this in the first place. I needed to understand my mother's move. This wasn't just an emotional outburst. The timing was too perfect, the language too crafted. I called the one person who might give me a straight answer. My aunt, my mother's younger sister, Carrie. We'd never been close, but she'd always been the black sheep, the one who saw through the family facade. She answered on the second ring. Elena, I was wondering when you'd call. Carrie, what is she doing? A long sigh. She's saving her brand, honey. Chloe told her about your anchor job last week. Your mother had a sponsorship deal with a family-focused home goods line coming up for renewal. A daughter who's a national news anchor doesn't fit the local mom-in-over-her-head aesthetic she sells. But a mother struggling with a difficult, ambitious child, that's relatable, that's content. I felt the world tilt. Are you saying she did this for a sponsorship? I'm saying she did it to control the story. If you were the villain who abandoned the family, then her perfect world narrative could still hold. She just had to adjust the script. The tears were real, I'm sure. The hurt that you'd outshine her chosen star, Chloe, that's real. But posting it, that was a business decision. The revelation was more devastating than the initial video. My betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was strategic. I was a threat to her bottom line. I thanked Carrie and sat in the darkening apartment. The hurt curdled into something harder, colder. The next day, another shock. A packet arrived by courier to the NBC offices, addressed to the news division head. It contained printed screenshots of anonymous messages sent to various online gossip blogs months earlier. The messages claimed an NBC associate producer was sleeping with a senior executive to get ahead. The producer was unnamed, but the details pointed to me. The executive was Martin. It was a lie, a vicious, professional lie, and attached to the packet was a typed note. Is this the character you want representing your network? The IP address from the courier's tracking was Scottsdale, Arizona. This wasn't just a mother's heartbreak anymore. This was sabotage. Someone was trying to destroy my career before it began, and I had a terrible, sinking feeling I knew who had helped gather the details needed to make that lie plausible. I confronted the only person who could have. I called Chloe. This time she answered. Did you know about this? I demanded, my voice trembling with rage. About what? She played innocent. About the packet sent to my bosses accusing me of sleeping my way to the top. The details in those messages, Chloe, only someone who knew my work schedule, knew Martin's name, could have written them. Silence, then her voice, cold and clear. You always think you're the smartest one in the room, Elena. You left, you broke Mom's heart. You don't get to win without consequences. She hung up. The confirmation was worse than the accusation. My own sister was an active participant in tearing me down. The family war was now a three-front battle. My mother's public narrative, my sister's private scheming, and my professional survival. With 48 hours until my debut, I had to make a choice. Play the victim, go on the talk show, and let my family drama define me, or fight back with the only weapon I had that they didn't, the truth, reported with the rigor I'd spent my life learning. I went to Martin's office with a proposal. I would do my debut broadcast as planned, but during the segment, I would address the elephant in the room, not with emotion, but with fact. I would present it as a case study in the era of digital narratives and family dynamics. I would interview an expert on media psychology. I would turn my personal hell into a professional story. Martin stared at me for a full minute. It's a huge risk. You could come off as cold, exploitative. Or I could come off as in control, I said, as a journalist who can separate herself from the story, even when she's in it. He leaned back. The board will never approve it. Don't ask them, I said, a plan crystallizing. Let me prepare it as a backup. If the audience metrics are high, if the chatter is still dominating, we switch to it last minute. We frame it as a responsive, courageous broadcast. A slow, grim smile spread across his face. It was the same look he'd had when I dug up the library funding story. "You're learning how this game is played." It wasn't a compliment. It was an observation. I spent the next 36 hours in a state of manic focus. I researched, I wrote, I rehearsed, I shut out the noise. My mother's video hit 3 million views. The talk show increased their offer. My father left another voicemail, pleading for me to call my mother. I deleted it. The night before my debut, I couldn't sleep. I scrolled through the social media chatter. The split was now 50-50. Half saw me as a monster, half saw me as a survivor of a toxic family. My performance was no longer just a newscast. It was a verdict. At 4 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Good luck tomorrow, I'm sorry, Dad." He'd never texted before, he'd never apologized. It was a tiny crack in the wall and it almost broke me. I put the phone down, my resolve wavering. But then I thought of the packet, of Chloe's cold voice, of my mother's calculated tears. This wasn't about family misunderstanding. This was about power, and I was done giving mine away. I walked into NBC at 2 p.m. on Sunday. The green room was filled with flowers, network well-wishes. Among them was a small, simple bouquet. The card read, "For the truth teller, Martin." It was the only one that mattered. The producer pulled me aside. "The pre-show metrics are through the roof. Social media is exploding. They're all waiting." She looked at me, her eyes serious. "Martin's cleared the backup segment. It's your call. The safe script or your version. What's it going to be?" I looked at the monitor showing the empty news desk, the iconic peacock logo behind it. I thought of the girl holding the ring light, staying out of frame. I heard the countdown in my ear. This was the threshold. I could either step into the light they had tried to use to burn me, or I could let them win. I looked at the producer. "We go with my version." The words felt like jumping off a cliff. For 90 seconds, I sat in the anchor chair in silence as the opening credits rolled, the weight of 3 million pairs of eyes pressing down. The floor manager pointed. The red light ignited, and I began not with the day's headlines, but with a single sentence. "Good evening. If you're watching this right now, there's a good chance you've seen a video of my mother." I paused, letting the admission hang in the air. Over the past 72 hours, a private family conflict has become a very public story. Tonight, instead of letting that story define me, I want to examine it with you, not as a daughter but as a journalist. I introduced Dr. Anya Sharma, a media psychologist on Satellite Feed. For the next 7 minutes, we dissected the phenomenon of public family shamming in the digital age. We talked about curated identities, the economy of victimhood, and the collateral damage when personal grief becomes public content. I was calm, analytical, citing studies and viewership metrics. I never raised my voice. I never cried. I presented my own life as a case study. When we cut to the first commercial break, the control room was dead silent. Then the producer's voice crackled in my ear. "Elena, we've just doubled our highest ever rating for this time slot. Social media is exploding. Keep going, exactly like this." The second segment was about resilience. I pivoted to a pre-taped piece about a first responder who'd used online criticism to fuel a community outreach program. The story was genuine, uplifting, and a masterful piece of narrative jujitsu. It reframed the entire conversation from family drama to overcoming public adversity. When I signed off 20 minutes later with a steady, "I'm Elena Vance. Thank you for watching," I felt a surreal detachment. The lights dimmed. The producer rushed over, her face flushed. "That was unprecedented. The network head is on the phone. He wants to talk to you." But before I could move, my personal phone, which I'd left on silent in my bag, lit up. Not with congratulations, with a screenshot. It was a new post from my mother's account. A photo of her and Chloe, arms wrapped around each other, faces somber. The caption, "Through everything, family is forever, blessed real love." It was posted exactly 3 minutes after my broadcast ended. Her counter-narrative was already live. She wasn't defeated. She was adapting. The call from the network head was a mixture of praise and pragmatism. "You took a massive swing, Vance, and the numbers are staggering. You've turned a liability into a talking point. But you understand this isn't over. You've just escalated the war." He was right. The reviews of my debut were split down the middle. Professional media critics praised its boldness and analytical depth. Tabloids and morning shows called it cold, calculated, and a shocking betrayal of a mother's love. I was no longer just a news anchor, I was a controversial public figure. The next morning, the talk show offer tripled. So did the pressure to accept. My agent called giddy. "Elena, this is a goldmine. We could book you everywhere." I told her no. Martin supported the decision. "You established your lane. Stay in it. Be the journalist, not the guest." But my family wasn't staying in their lanes. 2 days later, Chloe gave an exclusive interview to a popular YouTube drama channel. She sat in a softly lit room, wearing a simple sweater, playing the concerned, hurt sister. "I just wish Elena had talked to us," she said, tears glistening. All Mom wanted was a conversation. Instead, she went on national TV and made us look like monsters. It's so heartbreaking. She cleverly confirmed no specifics, just poured gasoline on the emotional narrative. The interview garnered millions of views. The wall between my personal and professional life was now fully demolished. Paparazzi started camping outside my apartment building. Bloggers dug into my past, looking for any scrap to prove I was the villain. They found nothing worse than a few college parking tickets. My pristine professional record was, ironically, a problem for them. It didn't fit the story. Then, the second major sabotage attempt. An anonymous tip was sent to 3 major newspapers, claiming I had fabricated a source in my award-winning college piece on library funding. It was a lie, but a sophisticated one, citing specific, incorrect dates and a fake professor's name. It forced the NBC Legal and Standards Department to launch a formal internal review. My credibility, my core currency, was under attack. I knew immediately who was behind it. The fake professor's name was Dr. Finch. Martin's last name. This was Chloe's work, using the inside knowledge she'd probed me for years to get. It was a scalpel, not a bludgeon. The review would take weeks. In the meantime, the cloud of suspicion was enough. The network quietly pulled me from a planned high-profile interview with a senator. The message was clear: I was damaged goods until proven otherwise. I felt the ground crumbling. I had won the broadcast battle, but was losing the war of attrition. My family was playing a long game, chipping away at the foundation of my career with lies that were just credible enough to be dangerous. I needed proof, not to show the network but to know for myself. I hired a private investigator, a discreet woman named Val who specialized in digital forensics. I gave her everything: the packets sent to NBC, the anonymous tips, the timeline. "Find the connection," I said. "I need to see it." While Val worked, I had to keep broadcasting. Every Sunday night I anchored. The audience remained huge, but it was now a circus. People tuned in to see if I'd crack, if I'd mention the drama. I never did. I delivered the news with a steelier resolve. The pressure forged me into a harder, sharper version of myself. The warm, curious girl from Colombia was gone, replaced by an armored professional. 3 weeks after my debut, Val called me to a secure office. Her findings were laid out in a flowchart. The anonymous messages to the blogs originated from a VPN, but the payment for the VPN service was linked to a prepaid credit card. That card was purchased at a convenience store in Scottsdale. Security footage, though grainy, showed a figure matching Chloe's height and build, wearing a hoodie, making the purchase the day after my NBC contract was announced. The packet couriered to NBC was sent from a mailbox rental place. The rental was paid for in cash, but the clerk remembered a woman who was, very nervous, kept her sunglasses on. She'd accidentally dropped a receipt from a high-end boutique in the parking lot. The boutique was Chloe's employer. It was circumstantial, but the pattern was undeniable. My sister was the operational arm of my destruction. My mother provided the emotional narrative. Chloe executed the tactical strikes. The most shocking find, however, was about my mother. Val had traced the initial surge in views of A Mother's Heartbreak. A significant chunk of the first 50,000 views came from click-farm services, bots designed to boost engagement and trick algorithms into promoting content. The purchase for those services was made 12 hours before the video was even posted. My mother hadn't just filmed a tearful rant, she had premeditated its virality. She had budgeted for it. This was a product launch. I sat with the evidence, feeling numb. This wasn't a family. This was a small, ruthless corporation, and I was a hostile takeover target. I presented the digital evidence only to Martin and the head of network security. I didn't want a public war. I needed them to know the attacks were malicious and external, to kill the internal review. They were alarmed, especially by the ClickFarm revelation. The review was quietly concluded 2 days later with a full exoneration. The senator interview was back on. But internally, I was shattered. The proof didn't bring relief, it brought a profound, isolating grief. The betrayal was now a documented fact, not a feeling. I decided to send one final, private communication. I emailed my mother and Chloe from a new, secure address. The email contained 2 attachments: the security still of Chloe at the convenience store and the invoice for the bot views. The body of the email was one line: "I know, all of it, the war is over, you've lost, do not contact me again." For 24 hours there was silence. Then my father called, he was crying. "Elena, they showed me the email, your mother, she's devastated, she wants to explain." "Explain what, Dad? The profit margin on her heartbreak." He broke down. "I didn't know about the bots, about any of that, I just wanted peace. I failed you, I'm so sorry." His apology this time felt real. It was the apology for his own failures, not an excuse for hers. It was a crack in the fortress, and for a moment I felt a pang of something like pity, but it was too late. The ceasefire held for a week. My broadcasts continued, my ratings stabilized at a high level. The public, bored with a conflict that had no new drama, began to move on. I started to believe I could outlast it, that I could bury the whole mess under a mountain of solid, professional work. And then, on a Tuesday morning, the third and worst strike landed. It didn't come from my family. It came from the consequences of my own success. A conservative media outlet, which had long criticized NBC, ran a primetime special. The title, "NBC's New Star, Manufacturing News from Family Drama." The special used my debut broadcast as its centerpiece. It argued that I hadn't reported a story. I had participated in a meta-narrative that blurred the lines between news and entertainment, that I embodied the network's descent into emotionally driven, personality-based journalism. They spliced clips of my mother's video with my analytical segment, making it look like a choreographed dance. They interviewed media ethics experts who condemned the broadcast as a dangerous precedent. They called for sponsors to pull their ads from my time slot. They didn't attack my family, they attacked my professional integrity and, by extension, the network's. This was the danger Martin had warned about. I had steered the narrative, but now the narrative was steering me and my employer into a dangerous ideological battle. My personal scandal had become a weapon in a much larger culture war. Network executives went into panic mode. Sponsor calls were fielded, legal drafted statements. My next broadcast was under a microscope, not for my performance, but for its very existence. The pressure was no longer about my family's lies, but about my value to the company's bottom line and reputation. I was summoned to a meeting with the entire board, not via Martin, a formal, cold summons. As I walked into the conference room, facing a line of unsmiling suits, I realized the true cost of my mother's video. It was never about destroying my career. It was about making me vulnerable. And in the cutthroat world of network television, vulnerability is a terminal diagnosis. They didn't need to fire me. They just needed to decide I was more trouble than I was worth. The chairman spoke first. "Elena, we have a decision to make, and it depends entirely on your answer to one question." He leaned forward, his hands steepled. "Where does this end?" I looked at the board, at their expectant faces waiting for a promise I couldn't make. "It ends," I said, my voice clear in the silent room, "when you decide whether you're in the business of news or the business of avoiding trouble. I can't control what my family does. I can only control the quality of my work. The special that attacked us didn't use fake facts. It used my real broadcast. If you think my work is the problem, then that's your answer." The chairman stared. No one else spoke. "You're asking us to endure continued controversy," he finally said. "I'm asking you to judge me on my journalism. The audience has. They're still here. The sponsors, from what I understand, are still here. The controversy is a perimeter. What's inside it is still a news broadcast." It was a gamble, reframing their fear as a perimeter, making the scandal seem like a fence around valuable property, not a sinkhole. Martin, who had been silent, spoke up. She's right. The special was an ideological hit piece. If we capitulate, we set a precedent. Every critic with a grudge will learn they can get ahead removed by creating enough peripheral noise. The debate that followed was tense, but the direction shifted. They weren't discussing my termination anymore. They were discussing damage control and long-term strategy. The decision, when it came, was a compromise. I would keep my anchor chair, but for the next quarter, my segment would have an additional, network-appointed senior producer overseeing all content, a chaperone. It was a vote of no confidence disguised as support. I accepted. It was the only move. Walking out would have proven every critic right that I was the problem. Staying under supervision was a humiliation, but it was a platform. The first broadcast with my new overseer was agony. Every script change was questioned, every guest vetted twice. But I delivered it flawlessly. The ratings ticked up again. The controversy, now institutionalized, lost its chaotic energy. It became a boring fact, the anchor with the chaperone. Meanwhile, the consequences for my family began to manifest. The digital media outlet that first broke the story about my mother's curated world published a follow-up. This one detailed the ClickFarm purchase. They'd gotten the information from a source, I suspect Val, though she never confirmed it. The article was titled, "The Influencer's Tears, a Viral Breakdown Preordained." The effect was immediate. My mother's brand deals evaporated, the family-focused home goods line dropped her follower count plummeted as people felt manipulated. The perfect facade cracked, revealing the machinery behind it. She didn't post for 2 weeks. When she returned, it was a simple photo of a coffee cup. The engagement was a fraction of what it was. Her currency was devalued. Chloe quit her job at the boutique and moved out of state. The evidence, while not public, had been shared with her by my father in a final, furious confrontation. According to my Aunt Carrie, he had shown her the security still and the boutique receipt. He told her she was no longer welcome in his house until she got serious help. She left without saying goodbye to anyone. My father did the one thing I never expected. He filed for legal separation. He rented a small apartment. He started therapy. He called me once a week, not to excuse but to check in. His conversations were clumsy, full of long pauses. "How was your broadcast?" "Fine, Dad." "Good, that's good." It wasn't a relationship. It was an excavation site, but he was showing up with a shovel. 3 months passed. The chaperone producer, a stern woman named Gwen, became less of a warden and more of a collaborator. My work was sharp, focused, devoid of any personal reference. I covered political scandals, international crises, human interest stories far removed from my own. I was becoming known for my clarity, not my drama. Then the surprise. Martin called me into his office. The chaperone period was over, the board was satisfied, and they had a new proposal. A weekly primetime documentary series. My series, The Focus, the construction and collapse of modern narratives from social media myths to political propaganda. The first episode was tentatively titled, The Story of a Story, When the News Becomes the Noise. They were offering me the very thing I had been forced to do defensively, turn analysis of public narrative into my beat, but now as a flagship offering. It was the ultimate institutionalization of my trauma. They weren't just forgiving the controversy, they were packaging it and selling it. I said yes, not because I was grateful, but because it was the final, decisive reclamation of the narrative. I would use their tools to examine the very machinery that had almost crushed me. The production was all-consuming. I hired researchers, journalists, forensic experts. We planned episodes on conspiracy theories, influencer culture, cancel culture, and the ethics of true crime. The first episode, my story, would be the pilot. Which is how, 6 months after my mother's video, I found myself sitting across from her in a neutral studio, cameras set to roll. It was her condition for participating. She wanted a platform to tell her side. I wanted her on the record. My producer, Gwen, would be conducting the interview. I would be in the control room, watching. My mother arrived looking older, thinner. The influencer glow was gone. She sat down, smoothed her plain dress, and looked at Gwen, not the camera. For an hour, Gwen asked precise, factual questions about the timeline, about the sponsorship deal, about the Click Farms. My mother, at first, tried to revert to the heartbroken persona. But Gwen was relentless with documents, with dates, with the metrics report showing the bot activity. Halfway through, my mother broke. not into performative tears but into a quiet, stunned silence. Then she said, "I thought I was protecting us. I thought if I controlled the story, we'd be okay. I didn't think it would become the only story." Gwen asked, "Did you ever consider just calling your daughter?" A long pause. "No," she whispered. "That would have meant she had the power. I couldn't let her have the power." It was the most honest thing she'd ever said to me, even though she was saying it to a stranger. It wasn't about love or pride. It was about power, and she had lost. We didn't use most of the interview in the final cut. We used the clip about the power. It was more devastating than any tearful confession. The series premiered to critical acclaim and strong ratings. It was reviewed as smart, timely, and surprisingly empathetic. The episode about my story didn't paint me as a saint or my mother as a monster. It painted us as figures in a system that rewards conflict and penalizes nuance. I was credited as the executive producer and host. My mother was listed as a subject. The night it aired, my father came to my apartment for the first time. We watched it together in silence. When it ended, he cried, not for the mother on screen, but for the daughter sitting next to him. "I'm so sorry I wasn't your father when you needed one," he said. "I know," I said, and for the first time it was enough. My mother never watched it. She moved to a smaller town, deleted her influencer accounts, and got a job in a small real estate office. According to Carrie, she tells no one about her past or her daughter. The silence she wanted has finally been achieved, but it's the silence of irrelevance, not peace. Chloe sends a birthday card every year with no return address. I don't open them. My career is no longer defined by that one viral video. It's defined by the work that came after. I won a Peabody for the series. I still anchor the Sunday news. The audience is solid, reliable. They tune in for the news now, not the ghost of my family drama. But here is the final, surprising detail, the one that brings the story full circle. Last month, we were planning a new season of the documentary series. My team proposed an episode on the resurgence of traditional broadcast news in the digital age. We needed a case study of a successful modern anchor. My head researcher brought me a list of potential subjects. The third name on the list was my own. I looked at it, my name surrounded by legends of the industry. The researcher, a young woman who didn't work here during the scandal, said, "Your trajectory is actually perfect for it. Your debut had these insane, viral numbers that then stabilized into a really loyal, grown-up audience. It's a model of transitioning digital notoriety into long-term credibility." She had no idea. To her, it was just data. The wildfire my mother set had, in the end, burned away everything flammable and left behind a foundation solid enough to build a career on. The disgrace had become the credential. I told her to find another case study. Some stories you don't need to narrate, you just need to live them. So where does that leave me? In a quiet apartment on a Sunday evening preparing for a broadcast. The script is clean, the facts are checked. There is no chaperone. There is no lurking fear of a family-shaped ambush. There is just the work and the quiet that comes after you've reclaimed your own name. The producer's voice counts down in my ear. The red light glows. I look into the lens and I see neither a villain nor a victim. I see a journalist. The story, as they say, is in the past. The telling is now. And I am finally, unequivocally, the author. People often ask me, did you get revenge? Or did you get an apology? The truth is, I got something else entirely. I got the pen. My mother tried to write my story as a tragedy, with her as the wounded heroine and me as the disgrace. All I did was take that pen from her hand and write a different ending. Not a fairy tale, but a document. A record of what happened when a private hurt was weaponized for public consumption and how that weapon misfired, permanently altering its target. The broader implication, the one that stays with me long after the headlines faded, is this: we are all living stories. But we are not just the characters. We are also the editors. My mother edited me out of her narrative for years and then tried to edit me in as the villain. She believed she controlled the final cut. But the audience, the world, they have a say. And in the end, they chose the version where the quiet girl with the ring light steps into the frame and speaks for herself. This isn't a story about winning. It's a story about sovereignty. The power to define your own life is the most fundamental power there is. No viral video, no family lie, no corporate boardroom can take that from you unless you hand it over. I almost handed mine over out of a desperate, childish need for their approval. The greatest gift my mother ever gave me was showing me, in 6 brutal minutes, exactly what that approval was worth. So the lingering question isn't whether my family regrets it. I'm sure, in their way, they do. The question is, what story are you letting someone else write for you? Is it a parent, a partner, a social media feed, a boss, or have you handed over the pen because you were told you weren't qualified to hold it? My name is Alina Vance. I am an anchor for NBC News. I am a daughter who was publicly disowned and a journalist who used that very public square to build a career. These facts are not in conflict. They are the foundation, the crack that let the light in. If this story made you think about the narratives you've accepted, the ones you've fought, or the pen you need to reclaim, tell me in the comments. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories about people who took back their own authorship, click subscribe, because everyone has a story, but only you get to write the ending. Thank you for listening to mine.